Good. Everybody, good. So we do our little motivation, and we think we're here to listen to these views from Buddha, but they particularly hear much of it from the Vajrayana tradition about the death process itself, which is itself very fascinating, and also especially how to prepare for death and the reasons why, Why? We're going to listen to this so that we can be ready for death. Because as Lama Zopa says, if we want to help anybody in this life when they need us most, is at the time of death, because it's at the time of death that the karmic seeds that will determine our next life are triggered, It's actually the most crucial time. We'll discuss that. So that we can be ready for death and we can help others. The most precious thing we can do, including our pets, our grandmother, our friends. So we do our little refuge prayer. First two lines of our prayer are expressing our reliance on the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha. And the second two lines expressing this altruistic motivation, the long-term goal, so that we can listen to these teachings so that we become a Buddha finally and be a benefit to others. That's it. Yes, that's the one. Sangye charang soke chognam la jang chu badu jagni kyap suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki rola penchir sangye drupa shok sangye charang soke chognam la jang chu badu jagni kyap suchi dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki rola penchir sangye drupa shok Sangye charan soke chognam la Janchu badu jagni kyapsuchi Dagi chunyen gipe sonam ki Drola penche sangye dropashok. Well, I've noticed these days that more and more people are talking about death and getting ready for death, and hospice movements and people, hospitals, people. I remember going to a conference in Australia, and it was very moving. All these young doctors and nurses electing, to work with dying people. So it's great that, that indicates maybe there's less fear about it, because we also know we have tremendous fear about death. I remember one children's hospital in Sydney, and this lovely doctor, because you can imagine, the fear around death of children is unbearable for people. Babies, it's just too unbearable. So there's so much shame and guilt as well, He's such a dear man, and he at this conference, all these kinds of people talking, and I gave a little talk about the Buddhist view, and it was so sweet. He had the morgue for the dead babies in the hospital. It was open, and he had it always open, and he had it decorated like a nursery, so the brothers and sisters and the families could go in and out. And this little boy, come and meet my dead brother. So it's very sweet, very moving, and it's so good. But of course, the radical difference here is, yes, it is marvelous that we're getting ready for death. But the key point here, from the Buddhist perspective, is to help the dying person. Because, to say that the time a person needs you most is when they die is very weird in the ordinary world. It makes no sense, because if we have the materialist view, you're finished. There's nothing left. And we can see now, it's a bit distressing, actually, that more and more in our culture, people have permission to kill themselves and each other, and it's happening more and more all the time, hastening death, Of course, based on compassion, supposedly. So what's the Buddhist approach? Because it's quite different. So again, the point we're discussing here, the teachings we're mainly discussing here, of course, are from the Vajrayana system, which includes all the traditions of all the teachings of the Buddha from the Hinayana and the Mahayana and the Sutra teachings, as well as the Tantrayana. But what's interesting is the explanation of the process, and that really only occurs in the Vajrayana. And it's very interesting. So Lama Zopa Rinpoche's book, which I really recommend. The paperback has run out, and then we're doing a reprint. But the digital book is still available from Wisdom as How to Face Death Without Fear. So it's really a manual. The first stage is about practical advice about what death is and how it happens, and various teachings. And then the main bulk of, 2/3 of the book is the back part, which is all the different practices and sutras and mantras and meditations that Rinpoche recommends that we use to help our loved ones, including our animals, to help their minds, So it's a very Buddhist approach. Mainly it's in a chronological order, what to do the months and weeks before death, what to do the days, the hours, the minutes at the time of death, when the breath stops, when the mind leaves the body, and what to do after that. So it's very practical, you know. So of course it's all framed in terms of helping somebody, but clearly you're helping yourself because you know how to approach, you know what to think and what to do. So as we know in the Tibetan teaching, this packaging of the teachings they call the Lam Rim, the stages of the path, where it's presenting from an experiential point of view and in an orderly way all the various teachings, each of the steps of the way on the path to enlightenment, culminating in Buddhahood. So the first stages, one of the very first teachings the Buddha gives, is about, you know, it's the teachings are his views, basically, as we know, about how life is, what is a person, what is a mind, what is happiness, what is suffering. And Buddha's key point, as we know, is how to stop suffering, how to get happy, and then how to help others. You know, the two wings of the bird, wisdom and compassion. So the very first way that's presented is one of the first teachings is about impermanence in general, you know. And the text that these teachings are based on from Atisha, this Indian scholar and yogi who spent the last 15, 20 years or something of his life in Tibet back in the 12th century, 11th century, 1100, 12th century, something like that. And it's his first teaching is on how to think about impermanence, how to prepare our mind, but particularly how to think about the impermanence of death. So his agenda is to get the idea about impermanence, look at Buddha's teachings about how things change moment by moment. But his main concern is to give us a wake-up call, not to waste this precious life. So to think about impermanence in terms of death. I mean, just the word, we don't like it, you know, death. So there's 3 points. So there's 2 things we're going to discuss. How to live your life in the framework of knowing you're going to die as a method for preparing for death. And then how to actually at the time of death, particularly the weeks and months and the days and the hours and at the time of death. So it's very kind of practical information. So looking at this point that Rinpoche makes, at the time a person needs you most is at the time of death. We need to understand that from the Buddhist perspective, because it's puzzling otherwise. So we have to remember, you know, the Buddhist view is, the Buddhist experiential findings about reality, is that there are trillions and trillions of sentient beings, mind possessors, is the term they use to refer to us. But we're not the only ones. There's also animals and many other kinds of beings that Buddha would posit that exist, non-physical beings we can't see, hell realms, spirits, all kinds of beings, trillions and trillions. And we're all mind possessors. I think it's a very nice translation. The Tibetan term is sem chen, mind possessor, the haver of a mind. We translate it as sentient being. I think mind possessor is very delicious. There's trillions of them. We're one of them. A dog is one of them. An ant is one of them. So all these sentient beings, these mind possessors, our consciousness, the thing that defines us as a sentient being, you know, we need to understand what this is, because this is fundamental to the whole Buddhist approach. We've got to know what he means by the word mind. First he says, and this is the radical difference from the materialist point of view, he says the mind is not physical. That's his observation. You know, he came out of this incredible Indian system, these genius Indians, as the Dalai Lama says, I always quote, was these amazing Indians more than 3,000 years ago who were the ones who began the investigation into the nature of self. And in their investigation, these brilliant thinkers and scholars and yogis, they cultivated this technique, simply speaking, a technique that culminates in this extraordinary level of concentration, samadhi, single-pointed concentration. At a level of mind, they effectively discovered we have this level of mind that's beyond the brain, that's beyond the gross level, beyond the sensory, beyond the gross conceptuality. Much more subtle, much more refined, more powerful, more subtle. And of course, this is one of the key techniques that Buddha brought with him when he diverged in his own direction, specifically in relation to the nature of self. And this technique is fundamental, central to all the Buddhist teachings, and a necessary technique we need to cultivate in order to do the job that he says we can do finally, which is to perfect our mind, to become a Buddha, to remove all the nonsense from the mind. He says that all the neuroses, the delusions, the ego, all of this nonsense that we just consider in our world a normal part of a normal person, so normal we think you'd be wacko if you didn't have them. But the Buddha has found that they're not at the core of our being. And this is central to the entire Buddhist approach. And then we can eventually remove this stuff from our mind, perfect the goodness here, and then the consciousness will be then a mind of an enlightened being. So it's not physical, fundamental first point. It is not the handiwork of anyone else. This is a very weird idea for the Buddha. We can be created by someone else, either mummy or daddy or a creator. No concept like that. Clearly, we have a body that comes from our mother and father, how kind they are, but they do not give us a mind. This is a radical point. Our mind is our own. We bring it with us from past lives, fully developed, fully programmed with what's in it. This is the business of karma. Every millisecond what we think and do and say programs us, produces the person we become. So everything we think and do and say leaves seeds in our mind. Buddha uses that analogy. Everything we think and do and say leaves a seed in our mind. Nothing goes astray. And then these seeds will eventually multiply and then manifest as our experiences. So in a sense, as His Holiness the Dalai Lama says, karma is like self-creation. That's his observation. No view of a creator. Therefore, no concept of punishment and reward. It's a dualistic view that we made up, Buddha says. He would suggest that. So our consciousness goes back and back and back and will continue more and on after we die. That's the Buddha's view. So this is why death is such an important time, because we've got these trillions of karmic seeds, so-called negative and positive ones. The next level of detail in this view of karma, this law of cause and effect, is that the actions we do that are labeled negative, and there's a very precise way of presenting what that means, but broadly it's an action we do with our body and speech that's driven by neuroses, driven by anger, attachment, jealousy, all the nonsense. These will ripen as our suffering. It's a natural law. And then the virtuous actions, an action we do based on our virtuous states of mind, love, compassion, kindness, wisdom, so on and so forth, they'll ripen as our happiness. There's a very straightforward presentation, extensive details in the literature. So having this view as a Buddhist, given that everything we think and do and say produces our future, given we don't want suffering and do want happiness, thank you very much, then it follows logically that the fundamental level of practice, the starting point, is to abide by these laws of karma, to don't sow seeds in the mind that will cause you future suffering. The main concern is that for oneself. So the karmic seed that is triggered at the time of death, and as I said, this is especially in the Vajrayana model, as the death process starts, and we'll go into it in detail in a minute. During that period, is at a certain point before you stop breathing, one of the karmic seeds that will be the one that will determine your next life is kind of activated. And the seeds we want to be activated, if we want another decent human life so we can carry on in our spiritual practice without too much interference, you don't want to lose the plot and go off to some other realm for a few eons, want to keep on track, is a positive state, a positive karmic seed, in particular, one of the strongest, most powerful ones of conscious, intentional non-harming, in particular non-killing. And so that in order for that to be triggered, we need the person, the animal, the human, your mother, yourself. You need to be going through this process as much as possible with a very peaceful mind. And that's the exact opposite of most people. We're either drugged out of our brain, not conscious at all. We're living in fear. We're isolated in one of those old people's homes, drugged out of our brains, not knowing what's going on, living in fear, never thought of impermanence, and death will be an awful experience. For most people, it's like that. Not to mention animals, you know. So the key way to help a person is to help them literally navigate this process so their mind can be calm and steady as much as possible. Because when the mind is calm and steady, this is the right condition to activate a positive karmic seed, which before you even stop breathing is already setting you up for your next life. The karmic seeds will determine, there are four things, the way our karma ripens, in four ways. One, a type of rebirth. Two, the tendencies in the mind in that rebirth, the mental tendencies, whether it's being good at music or good at killing or good at football or good at compassion. 2, 3, your experiences in that life. These are determined by the karma you create. And 4, even the way the physical environment impacts upon you. So we want those to be delicious, rich, virtuous karmic seeds. So we get a decent human rebirth, good virtuous tendencies, good experiences, and so we can live another decent life, carry on our spiritual path, die again, and eventually when the mind is ready, fully developed, become a Buddha, and we can be of benefit to others. Something like that. So death is a really vital time, a really important time. And from this perspective, because the karmic seed that will determine your next life occurs at that time. That's why it's most important. This life's over. This life's over. We'll get ready for the next one. So it takes time to have this view. For many people, it's kind of a totally boring idea, this idea of karma and past lives and future lives. Like, who cares, That's okay. It's fine. But this is the Buddha's view. This is emphasis here, So, and especially the emphasis on karma, is that we are the one who's responsible. We're the one who creates it. We are the cause of this life we've got now. We're the cause of the bad things that happen, the good things that happen. We're the main cause, and we will be the main cause of our future. So it really puts the whole Buddhist emphasis puts us in the driving seat. It makes us responsible, because we do want happiness and we do not want suffering. This is the idea. So the way to prepare for death from day one is to be very conscious. And there's 3 points that Atisha makes, 3 things to think about in order to energize us not to want to waste this life, to want to live it in the framework of knowing that I'm impermanent. So the first thing to think about is that death is definite. And kind of what do you think? What do you do with that? Well, what we're doing here, what Buddha's pointing out is certain things to think about, only because we don't think about them, only because we're living in la-la land. He's simply telling us his view of reality. And he's saying that right now, because of ego, because of our fears and our dramas, we're living in a fantasy world of not bearing the thought of impermanence, not wanting to know about that I'm impermanent. We feel very permanent. We feel very solid. Everything feels very set in stone, Intellectually, we know we're going to die. But it doesn't. We don't know it experientially. And that's a problem, he says, because death is definite. It's going to happen. So why not be ready for it? For this very reason, that we can be at the time of death, be ready for it. The right karmic seeds be triggered, move on to another decent human life, and keep on popping. So that's the general idea. I mean, of course, if you don't posit a future life and don't have any interest in it, then it doesn't really matter. So I suppose if you're a Christian, you'd look forward to going to heaven, and it's a similar idea. You look forward to going to heaven to be with God, and you do God's will. Nothing wrong. If a materialist view, which is that you just turn into dust, the reason you want to be virtuous, the reason you want to be a good person, I suppose, is because you want to make the world a better place, which is marvelous. A person like that, death will be comfortable. So the thing to first think about is that the death is definite. And that's to counteract this instinctive feeling that even though we know it's true intellectually, experientially, we don't want to know about it. So we live in denial of it. We don't want to think about it. So the only reason to think of this is to think of it, to meditate on it every day, these particular techniques, or to remind yourself in the day, death is definite, is to get the wake-up call, to realize that'll be me. That's the way to do it. Not just, there's an ant dead, the death is definite. There's a person dead, there's a people dead over there, but not me. Because it's always like, as Lama Zopa says, we have this bizarre idea. We divide the world into 2 groups, the living people and dying people. I mean, it sounds right, it's true. And as soon as you say a person is a dying person, it's almost like they're not a real person, isn't it? Think about that. They're not even a real person. Dying people, what we do with a dying person? They don't have a life, don't have a future, we think. So dying people. And your auntie's got cancer, you're a dying person. And it's a really true idea. We really do think like that. But I'm a living person, like the hubris of it. I'm a living person. But it's like a joke, as Lama Zopa says, we're all dying. Just don't know when, that's all. My friends on death row in prison, they're on death row. You think, wow, they all don't know they're dying. No, they don't. They're just like us. They feel permanent. Death is definite. So it gives a wake-up call. And the wake-up call is a sense of urgency not to waste a life. Because if you have the idea, the Buddhist view, that it's up to you to create your future, because your mind will continue, Buddha said. That's his deal. Your mind will continue. So if it will continue, you better make it a decent one for your sake. That's the whole point. That's why the analogy of seeds is good. You've got a piece of ground. You notice that things grow in it. You've got to live here. Well, you want a decent garden. So you can't just sort of float around. You've got to start, and you want to grow the garden. You want to put the right things in. You've got no time to waste. You can't wait till the future for the good things to grow. You've got to do it now. Death is definite. So the way to get that is when you see it out there, and then you go, that'll happen to me. Okay, wake up call. The second one is the time of death is uncertain. That's really clear. I mean, this is really clear. Because we might think, yeah, I'm dying, but death is a long way away. Even when you're old, I promise, even when you're old. That's the thing, if you look how you feel, we know we're getting old. We look in the mirror, we're shocked, aren't we? We know we're getting old. But we don't feel any different, do we? We don't feel, your body might be achy, but this feeling of it's very solid. I never quite know where it stops. Are we 15, 20, 25, and we think that's me? I don't know what it is. But you don't feel mentally that you're moving towards death. Because we have this vivid misconception in the mind. Buddha calls it grasping at permanent me. It's an entire philosophy. He argues with it. And the Hindu view is that there is a permanent me. There's a permanent, solid, unchanging essence called me, self, I. Fantasy, Buddha says. We're a dynamic process, you know. So the time of death is uncertain. But the feeling we have is I'll die. Maybe I'll die, but not yet. I'm not ready for death, so I'm not going to die today. Time of death is uncertain. We know that. Every day we hear about someone dying, especially if you die young, get killed, accident happens, you get murdered, whatever happens every day. We know people like this. It's always a shock. We've got to ask, why is it a shock? We've got to ask the question, why is it a shock? Not because we're just sad and we miss the person. It's because we assume they're permanent. We don't even think we think that. That's why we're shocked. You're only shocked at something because you think it shouldn't happen. And because you're attached. So if you have a beautiful cup, but you're attached to your cup, you know that, stuff breaks. You know this breaks, because you're attached to it. And these work very nicely together. Because you're attached to it, you can't bear the thought it'll break. So you impose this lie upon it that it's permanent. It won't break. And then you're shocked when it does. And then we think we're suffering because it broke. No, you're suffering because you believed it wouldn't break. So it's a fantasy. This is one of the major teachings the Buddha gives, that we've got this misconception deep in our bones, that things are permanent. And we know that's true. It's very mixed with attachment. I always quote, I always say, I say her name every time, Nicole Kidman, that Australian actor. I love the woman, but I remember vividly when I read an interview with her 20 years ago, when she was still with Tom Cruise. And it's not being mean. This is such a good example. Talked about their life, how it was amazing, and their life. So think about that. We've got a good life, right? So it's good, meaning attachment's getting what it wants. Things are lovely. They were in love. They had kids. They had their lives, and you have this. Everything's wonderful. We all have that. So this is the point. Because attachment's getting what it wants. Attachment is primordial kind of emotional hunger that only wants everything to be lovely. So when things are lovely, it's like this amazing, we can't believe how wonderful, my God, I can't believe how wonderful things are. And then because we can't bear the thought of it not being lovely, we dump another lie on top of it, that it will last forever. And she said, we will be together until we are 80. We understand that. So what she's saying is, because it's so good, and you want it to last, but we actually believe it will last. Because you feel so good together, you believe it will be together until we're 18. Interestingly, her next thought, I'll never forget, the next thought was, and if we won't be, I will be devastated. And she was. I read all the news. I read magazines and newspapers. I read another interview after he left her, and then she had fallen down to despair. And that's the thing. This is the trouble. When everything's wonderful, You're so excited. Things are wonderful. Your life is good. You're in love. You've got good. It's like, and there's nothing wrong. Use it, have it every second. But to put this lie onto it because it feels good, you think it will last forever. So what happens is we take it for granted. Oh, it'll always be there. That's what it means, grasping at it as permanent. It'll just always be there. So you start getting kind of this inertia of laziness and take it for granted and not make the most of it. Do you understand? We do that. So this lie we put upon it. And then when she fell to despair, they did in fact not be together until they're 80. And this is the tragedy now, when you fall down to despair and the nice things have gone and there was only ugly things, then now you also think that is permanent. And you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, and that's when you kill yourself. This is unbearable. This is because we grasp at things as unchanging. It's unbearable. So it's so clear. And it's just so integrated, so deeply in our bones, we don't question it. You know, our mother didn't teach us. It's a primordial misconception in the mind. So it's waking us up, counteracting this at a most simple level, thinking about it, contemplating it. 1, death is definite. 2, the time of death is uncertain. That one's the powerful one. Then you won't waste this precious life, this relationship, this good thing that is there at the moment is good. So you don't waste it. You don't take it for granted. So when you realize this, the Lama say, when you really realized impermanence, your whole life changes. You have much more energy, more enthusiasm. You don't hold on to the garbage because you know it could end at any time. You're not going to hold on to all these grudges and resentments and have fights and dramas every day, bitter, angry, upset, resentful, jealous. No, what a waste of time. Why would you want to do that? You make the most of it. This precious life and this precious opportunity and this precious relationship or whatever. I remember one woman on a class, you know, she said she lived all her life. She was every day terrified her husband would die. She lived in fear. This is common. She lived in fear that her husband would die. What'll I do, she said. Of course, the commonest thing people say is, don't be ridiculous. Of course he won't die. What a load of rubbish. Of course he's going to die. So I said to her, think he will die. Then instead of living in fear of it, realize he's alive right now. Let's make the most of it, baby. And if you wake up in the morning, he's dead, then you accept. But if he's not, as a bonus, and you make it most of the next day. That's what comes if you think things are impermanent. Things are dynamic and changing. It's better than just this inertia of grasping at things as the same. And that's what brings boredom and depression, you know, and despair. We can see this one. Now, the third point, the key point, the conclusion, the action point. At the time of death, whenever it might be, and as Lama Zopa says, the best thing to think is I'm going to die today. It's because it'll give you the energy to wake up. And the thing is, when you realize that, you're not living you're not anticipating death. You're not thinking, oh, well, Tom could leave me today, so why bother? No, you make the most of it. So it's stuck in the background, you know. So the conclusion point is, at the time of death, what's important? So, of course, this is the Buddhist view. Well, at the time of death, at that time, the death process starts. Given that the karmic seed I would like to be activated at that point is a very strong, delicious, rich, intentional, particularly non-killing karmic seed from practicing non-harming, especially in the context of giving vows of non-harming, which is very potent psychologically. That's the one I want to be triggered. So I'll get another decent human birth, plus all the right conditions. Given that, then it follows, you know, because I do want happy. Okay. No, given that my mind is a continuity, given that at the time of death my mind will continue. First point. Given that the karmic seeds in my mind that can either ripen, negative seeds will ripen as my future suffering, and the positive seeds will ripen as my future happiness. And given that I want happiness and don't want suffering, then it follows logically I'd better start nourishing the positive seeds. I better start activating, growing, intentional. And karma means, the main meaning of karma is mental action, the thought. You know, that's the starting point of creating karma. It's the starting point of putting seeds in your mind. So then I need to practice from now creating the actions of non-harming, non-killing, not the bare bones, virtuous actions of non-harming, especially in the context of keeping vows, which is going to be very potent. So that when I am dead, when I do get ready for death, my mind, because also secondly, living in this framework of impermanence, it won't be a surprise to me. I'll be ready for it. It's only a surprise because you're living in denial of it. If you're ready for it, you know you're ready for it because you've lived your life in a good way. No regrets. You've got a little bank vault full of delicious, rich, virtuous karmic seeds that you've planted there in your life every day. Then you can die with a happy mind because one of those virtuous karmic seeds will be triggered, will be activated, and then you'll get another decent life and you'll keep on moving because you've created it, because you're the boss. This is the most shocking concept. If you're a Christian, you rely upon God. Nothing wrong with that. You be a good person, God will reward you. Nothing wrong. I'm not complaining. The materialist view, we don't have one. You just go into dust. That's okay. The Buddhist view is you're in charge. You're not being punished or rewarded by anybody. You're the boss. That's a very powerful concept. You're the boss. It's up to you. No one else is going to grow your garden. You've got to do it. Don't waste your time. So given that your mind continues, given you don't want suffering and do want happiness, you'd better start planting the virtuous karmic seeds today, now. That's it. That's the bottom line. Live your life like that, honey child. You'll live a good life. You'll be ready for death. Won't be surprised. That's the essence of that one. It makes sense from this perspective. So then let's look at then how to help somebody who's dying. So the book, of course, is written weeks and months before. It implies that it's like a sick person, old person, and you're there to help them get ready for death. Another person, So the Buddhist view, of course, and Lama Zopa especially, the key practices, all these practices related to the Buddhas, related to, practicing your daily life of living in virtue, living in goodness. But then the tools you can use, many of his practices in the back of the book are related to the Buddhas, the mantras, the sutras, and all these practices. And why they're important, this is the Buddhist view about back to karma. That every millisecond of what any sentient being sees, hears, tastes, touches, smells, or thinks. It's a very interesting view. None of it goes astray. Everything is stored in that person's mind, not their brain. You could argue that it's my way of putting it, the brain is a physical indicator of what's going on in the mind, which is not physical. We come into this life programmed with our own tendencies and karmic seeds, right? As everything is stored in our mind. So given that, especially we want virtuous imprints in the mind. It's how you can help other people. You can't make people practice virtue, but the practice, especially for animals, you can't do much, One of the key practices, Rinpoche, and most of his practices are related to this, he has total confidence in all these practices. They're practices of reciting mantras, reciting prayers, reciting sutras, hearing teachings, having for the person's mind, putting these virtuous karmic imprints in their mind, hearing the teachings, hearing the mantras, putting connection with the Buddhas in their mind so that this enables them to die well. This is very much the Buddhist approach. And I think in the world, many people mightn't have much of a religious faith in anything, but people feel, somehow I've noticed, people, especially their pets, are so happy that they can do something to help their pet. People want to do something, feel they want to do something, you feel kind of hopeless. So you just tell them to do a mantra. I send them Lama Zopa chanting the medicine Buddha mantra. They're so happy. They love having their little doggy hearing it, And many people, I remember this friend of mine in Australia has all these guinea pigs. Had their little names and lived in their little houses with their little lettuce leaves or whatever it was. And she had speakers, but they had the medicine Buddha day and night. She was so happy doing that, Many people do that. And I've heard so many stories of people with their animals, they play the mantras and it calms them down, and the humans as well. This is one of the big things, because the Buddhist view talks about the mind being more subtle, right? So when you're in a coma, for example, when you're asleep, we would say, oh, well, they're in a coma, they're asleep, they're not conscious. But this Buddhist view, and this is what gets us to the death process, this is the Vajrayana model. We're made up of, we've got gross consciousness, which is our sensory consciousness, obviously the grossest level of our being, our sensory consciousness. Then we've got, and that's inextricably linked to this gross body. Then we have subtle consciousness, which is our mental states. So clearly we experience our mental states right now in this gross life, but at a very gross level of all our conceptuality, all the thoughts and feelings and emotions. But they've got a much subtler level. And so when you go to sleep every night, and the sleep process is the same process that's described in the Vajrayana as the death process, the same process of deconstruction occurs, and we're going to go through it. So in this process, by the time you stop breathing, in death, for example, sleep, when you've gone to sleep, as we say, we know your senses have ceased. You touch the person, they don't feel it. So there's a clear explanation of the Vajrayana model. We'll go into this briefly. That when you quieten down, then but now your mental consciousness, we know that is still existing. You have all these vivid dreams. That's your mental states. And of course, they're weird and wacko because there's only at that level you're experiencing. There's no grosser level. The senses have temporarily ceased, So there's a person in coma. So the point is, there's so many stories, like the animals calming down, people have dreams, people who've been unconscious can be influenced by the mantras. I've so many stories like this. I remember one of my friends in Sydney she was unconscious in hospital, the ER, and her husband asked the hospital if I could come along. They said I was her pastor or something. So, and they heard I was a Buddhist nun, and I was there. She was in the ER, and they asked, and when I got there, they said, please don't ring any bells. So I promised I wouldn't ring any bells. So I just sat next to my friend Judy, and she was in a deep coma, with all wired up, They didn't think she'd come out of her coma. And she was very close to some of the lamas, Sakya Trinzen, Songsar Khyentse Rinpoche. So before I went to the hospital each night, I'd go late at night because it was easier to drive fast over from Sydney. I had to go about 50 kilometres from where I lived to get to the hospital. And I'd say every now and again, I asked the students of these lamas to ask them to pray for Judy, okay? So every now and again, I'd say mantras in her ear. And every now and again, I'd say, Judy, His Holiness Sakya Trinzen is praying for you. Judy, Sogsar Khyentse Rinpoche is praying for you. So every night I'd do this. And then one day she woke up, came out of a coma, all perky and happy. And I went to see her. And she told me that the only thing she could remember in those weeks was this husky voice. She didn't know it was me. No, I didn't tell her husband. She thought it was a blue lady coming through the window saying exactly those words. Now you can't make that up. Do you understand? You can't. The number is, because the point is, the Buddhist view, sound is much more subtle. It's obvious. Maybe you can't see when you do in your dreams. You can sort of have an experience of seeing, but sound is very powerful. So one of the key things here in terms of helping people die, having this view, one of the major things is to be quiet. Be quiet around sick people, old people, dying people. Because your mind is getting more subtle, you are literally gradually deconstructing, aren't you? Your senses are lessening, you're more fragile. And what that means is you're getting closer to your subtle consciousness. And that means you're much more sensitive. At the grosser level, when you're more fragile, the smallest sound can be unbelievably distressing. It's the same with meditator. I remember interviewing years ago in the 90s, Venerable Rene. I don't know if he's ever been here, has he? The Swiss monk, a meditator. He's been doing meditation for 45 years. And he told me about his very first serious retreat, attempting to get single-pointed concentration, which means you go to get the mind to become at a more subtle level. And he said, as your mind gets more subtle, he was at our center in Spain, up in the Sierra Nevada, out of Granada, a very beautiful place, where Lama Ursel was born, Lama Yeshe's reincarnation. But he said at some point, he knew he couldn't get past the fifth of these 9 stages of concentration. But he said the mind was, when you're not used to doing this, he was a fairly new meditator at that point, he's been doing that for 40 years or more. His mind was incredibly sensitive to the tiniest shift in the wind would distress your mind. So the same when you're getting more sick and more dying, because people's minds can be so fragile. So it's so important for pets as well, especially if they're unconscious, to be so quiet and to only have the sound of mantras and prayers, which can really be much more powerful for their mind and invoke the presence of the Buddhas. You know, this is a really major point Rinpoche says. So important. So mantras and prayers is the key thing from Rinpoche. They're really the key thing that can help people, because it puts an imprint. It leaves an imprint, an impression, a tendency, a memory, if you like, in the mind, which then enables a person to meet it again, you know. So the key way to help people is, for example, externally, he says, you know, it's the job of all the doctors and the nurses and these people, the health professionals, it's their job to take care of the body, but it's our job to take care of the mind. And that means to, at all the gradual stages, is to help them be peaceful. So, and why? Is because we know that death is fearful. And if you've never thought about the impermanence, you've never thought about it in your life, you've never considered the possibility you die, of course, now and that's why people are unable to even face the fact they're dying. You know, to help people, you can't force them to know, but at least help them be peaceful. Because the fear is so primordial, you know. Because we've died, from Buddha's point of view, we've died countless times. Countless times. You know. So help to be, so that the condition, the place where they are should be very conducive, very beautiful. Usually sick rooms are about the worst place you can be. They're ugly and mucky and dark and miserable, you know. They should be beautiful because they've still got senses. And if you can enhance those senses, lift their mind, have beautiful views, lovely light through the window, peaceful trees, flowers, sky. A friend of mine, a nun, same age as me, born in the year of the monkey, 1944. 3 of my nun friends, all born in the year of the monkey, same as me, they're all dead. You know. Trisha, she'd lived in India for 50 years. She ran our centre in Bodh Gaya. Yeah. So she was in Australia seeing some friends, and she went to the hospital and she had this virulent cancer. So she called Rinpoche and he said, you better get ready for death. No point in trying to do anything. You're going to get ready for death. Get ready. So she went up to, she was in Queensland, up in the tropics, and she found this beautiful place. It looked like Bali. This lovely place with mountains and the sky, peaceful. She stayed in this place. So then she's lying in bed, gradually dying, and she opens her eyes. It makes you peaceful. But if you open your eyes and it's all cluttered and dark and ugly and machines and people shouting, and this is why, in a way, hospitals, the nurses and doctors are so kind. It's about the worst place to die. You know? The distress, everybody else's emotion, everything echoes, doors are banging, people's dramas. It's the most distressing place to die. Of all things, he stresses this. Make it peaceful, conducive for the person to be peaceful. Because when the mind is peaceful, the virtuous seeds can manifest, you know. Because we know when the mind is unpeaceful, it triggers anger, it triggers fears. It's the worst way, and that triggers negative karma to ripen. Be peaceful and beautiful. And the people, it's so important that the people who take care of that person should be people that the person likes. You know, they've got to trust them. Because the one that we can see, because it's fear, we all know in life, it's very clear, when something goes wrong, we're all desperate to turn to somebody, aren't we? We need someone to rely upon. We need support. There's nothing more precious than having a person who supports us when we're sick or something bad happens, you know? We know that. I remember one time in Nepal at Kopan, which is on a big hill, there's many steps, and I was going down to visit my friend Fran, the nun Fran, and she lives I know it's about 90 or 100 steps, so I counted them. So I had to exercise because I was going to go up to the mountains and I didn't want to, and I had to exercise, get strong. So I had to count my 100 steps. So I was walking down the 100 steps and I really got to the bottom and I tripped and I fell and I hurt my back and I screamed, Fran! You understand? Because you reach out to somebody. You want someone to be there for you. The pain was as bad, but Franny's there. Oh, sweetheart, I'm so sorry. And you feel better straight away, don't you? We know this. And your pet's the same. When we're fearful, we need someone to support us. This is the most precious thing because, you know, they got to die, but your presence can be so beneficial. Kind, steady, supportive. understand what they want. So like what practices, for example, Trisha, my different friends, as she got older, sicker and sicker, my friends would take turns in supporting her, but she was very independent. She didn't want people reading her prayers to her. Go away, leave me alone, I can decide. So you got to know what the person wants. Don't force things on them. Don't be like this one Buddhist husband his wife's in bed dying, and he wakes her up every 2 hours and forces her to do her prayers. I mean, for God's sake, give the woman a break, you know. Do her bloody prayers for her. Let it be peaceful. That's too heavy. So when the person wakes up, the place is sweet, quiet, and you're there loving them. Wow, what a gift. It's so clear. And I think in those old people's places or the hospitals, all these old people are drugged out of their brains. Even just the cleaning lady smiling at you can be at the gift that you need, you know. We need this. It's so clear. I know it's really true. I mean, when you're a little girl, I remember you're a little girl and something goes wrong. You have a mother. You're lucky to have a mother. And something goes wrong. The first thing you do is you make a beeline for mummy and you're crying, looking up into her eyes as if the whole world has collapsed. Mummy, mummy. And well, you know what she does? Oh, darling, it's all right. And she gives you a hug. And you know what? You believe her. That's how easy it is to help people. Tell them it's okay. It's all right, sweetheart. I'm here. I'm supporting you. It's all okay. And you calm down. It's obvious that's a powerful way to help people. It's clear. Don't give them lectures. Love them, support them. This is the most precious gift. So the person should love you and like you and trust you. And the people in the room, if you're the one in charge, okay, if you're about the 9th person in charge, you have no control. When my sister died, a couple of years ago, my older sister, well, many of us in our family, 7 kids. My mother had 8 babies in about 9 years or something. 7 girls and then a boy. My brother, Tony. People think, oh, isn't he lucky? No, he had these 7 bossy sisters, all like me, you know. Can you imagine? For my poor brother. Anyway, whatever. But my older sister died, Jan. She fell down the stairs and she fell on her head. She was skinny as a rake. She was like anorexic, tiny, tiny little skinny body. And she fell down the stairs and fell on her head and blood everywhere. So my sister Judy was there and she took care of her and they rang me. And I was coming to Australia anyway, but the Qantas let me come a bit sooner. And I kept saying to them, please keep her alive. They used to be, we're all Catholics once. They all hate Catholicism now. They all have no religion, no spiritual practice. And they said, Robina, she's dead. I said, I know she's dead, but just keep her breathing, please. And this is a big point. Even though the person has stopped breathing, this death process is described in 8 stages, okay? The first 4, once the 4th stage occurs, each of those stages, I'll talk the process now. First of all, various things deconstruct, cease functioning at each of these stages. And of course, this is based on this model of the Vajrayana. You've got gross body and gross consciousness, the senses in the body. Then you've got the subtle mind, your mental states, and then you have a subtle physical energy, which consists of 72,000 subtle channels, like a subtle nervous system. It's similar to the Ayurvedic one, to the acupuncture one, certainly it's the Tibetan medical system. And coursing through all those channels are all these different wind energies, air energy, because as far as this model is concerned, the universe consists of 2 things, minds, billions of them, and matter. And all matter is made of the 4 elements. That's it. And all minds, this is what they say in the Vajrayana, are inextricably linked to their own set of the 4 elements. This is how it is. So the subtle nervous system, the winds coursing through all those channels and connected to all the different states of mind. So, you know, the Tibetan docs will feel your pulses and she will feel the imbalance of certain winds and she knows that's related to your attachment. That's why you're having panic attacks. So she gives you herbal medicine, which calms down the wind energy because it's quite subtle, and that'll help calm your mind down. It's roughly speaking how they talk. And of course, the Tibetan medical system is totally based on the Buddhist model of the mind, you know. And then you've got very subtle consciousness, which is we don't even posit as existing, you know, in our world. It's the subtlest level of your conscious being, inextricably linked to the subtlest level of the 4 elements, the subtle wind energy. This is the subtlest level, and that's what leaves the body eventually. So at the time of death, the first 4 stages, by the time you stop breathing, of course, for our world, you're ready for the body bag. But you're not dead yet, according to this system. Very clear. That's why, for this Tibetan Buddhist view, I mean, the Zens don't talk like this. They don't have this view. The Theravadins don't talk this way. It's only the Tibetan one, which is the Vajrayana. So once your breathing has stopped, the heart has stopped, grosser level, yes, has stopped, yes, but your mental consciousness is still there. And so that's why for at least you leave for at least 3 days, before you touch the body. The mind can leave sooner, in which case it's okay. And there are ways of checking. All this is described in the book, you know. So by the time you stop breathing, and if you think you're ready, this is one of the big pieces of information that's important to think about. This book, I read a book by an American medical journalist called Nick or Dick Tracy, and he wrote this book called The Undead. Not about zombies. It's about his profession is death. And he knows the American system, all the medical. So he writes about. So he's a very funny fellow how he wrote the book. But anyway, I read this book when I was editing Lama Zopa's book. I edited his teachings of Rinpoche's, and it was very fascinating because he was all about the contradictions and obstacles and problems in the American medical profession now, directly in the business of what do they call it? You know, they don't call it farming organs. That sounds too gross, doesn't it? Whatever they call it. What do they call it? That business? Who? Is that what they call it? Oh, organ. Yeah, that's it. That one. That one. Thank you. All this one. So there's all these obstacles now because they think that death is when the breath stops. But one of the biggest obstacles, he said, is this whole experience, which has been around for centuries in every culture you can find. People come back to life. It's most inconvenient. So it confuses them. So usually you put it in the too hard basket because it doesn't fit with the materialist model. But now that you're dying to get this little young bloke's delicious liver, because you've got a lineup of customers waiting, and he was very, very dismissive of the industry, by the way. He said it's not everybody in it, but he said there's a lot of arrogance and hubris and manipulation. I know in Europe now, because of the influence of all these people working in this business, the default thing is if you die, they will take your organs. It used to be that you have to give permission. Now it's the opposite. That's very wicked, you know. He was very dismissive, very critical. Anyway, when you stop breathing, you're not dead yet. The mental consciousness is still there. And so this is one of the things he said, so then people are confused because if the person comes back to life, then when is death? So they're really confused about it. So he had a whole chapter about people who have these experiences on the operating table of observing what's going on. So this is your subtle mind. And this is why people in dreams, this common experience, people who are dreaming or people have these vivid experiences of knowing what's going on, of hearing things, of seeing things, of leaving their bodies, the experience of leaving your body. You technically don't leave your body, but the experience is you're always floating above it, isn't it? You feel like you're watching it. That's how you have memories, actually. That's the way your mental consciousness works, I think. When you have a memory, it's like you're watching it from the outside, isn't it? So the thing is, and all these experiences, so people, of course, initially are quite cynical. Don't be ridiculous. They explain what happened. These people on the operating table, totally unconscious, having their operation, where they describe the music the doctors played. And initially, they he was saying they don't trust. They don't be ridiculous, Of course, they can't see, they can't hear, they're unconscious. But he quoted this experience of this one woman who had to have such a radical procedure that they were certain from their point of view that she could not be conscious. But he joked about it. She reported the most vivid out-of-body experience. You just can't argue with that. Like the thing about Judy, you can't argue with that. You just can't argue. I promise I told nobody. You can't argue with those experiences. So this is what they're being confronted with now. They can't just put them on the back burner, So one doctor who's in this industry, he said, I can now say with certainty that consciousness is not a function of the brain. I don't know what it is, but that I can say. So I think it's great. People are questioning what they think life and death is now, which is marvelous. So the problem for a Buddhist, and this is when Rinpoche talks about it, in one of the sections, we decided that we would describe what to do after the person has stopped breathing. People die in different scenarios. So what to do if they die at home? What to do if they die in an accident? What to do if they die suddenly? What to do if they die in giving their organs? What to do if they die in a hospital? So it's the same practices, but we put the chapters as individuals so people can check that chapter for their particular loved one's experience. So one of the organs is very interesting. First of all, Rinpoche, like any of these Tibetans you ask, they will praise this wish to give your organs. They say it's like a bodhisattva action. How amazing, so compassionate that you want to give your body to somebody. So to die with that motivation is very special. You know, he said, marvelous. But the danger is very clear. Because the mind is so fragile, so sensitive at this time of death. So that's why to have peaceful and quiet. And this is the thing, once you go through the 4 stages, the very first stage, the earth element ceases. And also the various things happen, but I'll just keep it simple. The body gets very heavy, you know. I was close to death at one time in India. I didn't know, I just felt terrible. But one Lama said I was close to death. It was the middle of summer in India, which is like living in hell, like 120 degrees every day in this particular place with no AC. And I got hepatitis and malaria together. But no one knew I had malaria because I was bright yellow. They all observed the malaria, the hepatitis, but this terrible malaria. And these fevers go, I mean, with hepatitis, the fevers last for about a week and then you just feel disgusting, you know. I lost about 30 pounds in a day and just living in this place with this immense heat. But I had malaria as well, and I was having these hallucinations week after week. No one could see. And then someone walked in to visit me, and they recognized immediately I had malaria. By the way, I had my fevers, so they put me in a hospital. But anyway, I knew. Kirti said I was close to death, and I remember I knew I had to get out of India. It was so intense. I was bright yellow, and I remember bringing my family. One of my sisters flew all the way from Brisbane to Singapore to pick me up. And I managed Air India, let me fly, even though I was hallucinating in bright yellow, you know, highly contagious. They let me fly, and I got to Singapore. And I never forget, in Singapore, in this room with air conditioning, it's like I'd gone to heaven. I can't tell you. It was like a miracle of joy. But the feeling I had is what they say when the earth element ceases, you feel like your body's sinking into the bed. That's exactly the experience I had. I thought I was sinking, you know, sign of death. And also at the same time, your eye consciousness ceases. Now, we know this experience. You know, when you're really tired and you're talking to somebody, I'm talking to Lou, and I'm really tired. And you know, you're sitting there, you're still upright, but your eyes are kind of glazed over, aren't they? You can't see properly because that's what you gradually, the elements are ceasing. They're deconstructing. The part of your mind that rides on those winds are gradually moving away from all the channels throughout your body, coming to the central channel. And then the second stage, there's a certain sign that occurs. Yogis can see these, but we can practice in meditation doing this. They say there's like this mirage-like experience, which is the interplay of the earth element and the next element which ceases, which is the water element. So the second stage is the water element ceases. The ear consciousness goes. That we know. I'm sitting upright, my eyes are glazing, and I just missed what he said in the last 20 seconds. We all have that experience. Especially in teachings, you're really asleep and Lama's over there asked you a question and you didn't hear it because you're going to sleep. And eventually, of course, you're going to fall over, you know. We know that experience. That's what's happening. These energies are deconstructing. Then the third stage is then the sign at the second stage is like, kind of like, they say it's like sort of interplay of water and the next one, fire. So it's a bit like sort of smoky, they say. The next stage is your eyes, ears, your tongue, your nose consciousness ceases. And then the fire element ceases. The heat in your body gradually goes. And then okay, at each of those stages, there's a certain capacity. They talk about the 5 wisdoms. It sounds a bit abstract. The first one is this capacity, the very first one, when the earth element goes, there's this capacity to hold a lot of information all at once. We know we can do that. If you're wide awake and wound up, you can see a million things, everything's clear, you can see the shapes and colors, you can hold a lot of information. That begins to cease. The second stage, the capacity to have sort of equanimity of the feelings of pleasure, pain, and indifference. The third stage, when the fire element goes, is the capacity to discriminate between this and that. You're gradually losing the plot. You're gradually falling apart, basically. By the fourth stage, your tactile ceases, your tongue consciousness ceases, and as Geshe Rabton says, that tongue that has spent its life gossiping is now useless. And then even the ability to even know who you are. You've lost the plot by now. The one before that, it's called discrimination. So by this point, you might be in the hospital dying. There's your beloved on this side and your worst sister, ugly enemy on the right-hand side. You can't tell the difference. You're losing the plot, you know. This can happen very slowly or very quickly. In a quick death, when if you die suddenly, you go through these stages like in a second, So the ideal is to go slowly so you can be ready for them. If you meditate on this every day, you'll be ready for them. You might even recognize the stages. So by the fourth stage, now your breathing stops. And that's when you think they're ready for the body bag, but you're not ready for the body bag. The earth, the four elements have ceased, the five senses have ceased. Now your mental consciousness, and that keeps getting more subtle as well. Various things occur. There's no reason to go into that now. There's no time. So what happens is, I was talking about the hospital business. That's right. In this book, this particular woman who was going to give her organs. So of course, what they do is they keep you breathing. This is my sister now. Back to my sister. So I said, please keep her breathing. And of course, my sisters just said, she's dead. It doesn't matter, but we'll do that for you, Robina. So I know when I got there, and I mean, my point before was, I was not in charge. All my bossy sisters were all very bossy. My brother too. We're all in the hospital. It was a bit emotional and kind of hyperventilating. All together in the hospital. There's Jan on the bed, dead, as skinny as a rake, dead, But I know because she's still breathing, her mind was still there. That's what Lama Zopa says. If you can still breathe, even artificially, and your body is warm, then it's because your mind is there, necessarily. So I couldn't, they all know I wanted to say mantras in her ear. My sister Jan was a total fanatic. As we say in Australia, when you follow a football team, or we use the verb, it's very weird, you barrack for a team. So Janet was a fanatic Sydney Swans barracker. Since she was 5, she even wrote a memoir, My Lifelong Love Affair with the Sydney Swans, she wrote it. And their colours were red and white. So my sisters had her dressed in a bloody red and white Sydney jersey, And then they always had a red and white scarf around her. And then when she was before they all left the hospital and they pulled the plug, they sang the Sydney Swans football song, And and they were talking and crying, and the worst thing possible. I wanted to be peaceful, but I couldn't say much. I mean, I'm fairly low in the totem pole of my family. Even though I'm a bossy girl, I'm not the bossy one in my family, I promise. They're more bossy than me. The 3 J's, Janet, Judy, and Julie. The three J's are the bosses. And so Janet, one of them is dead. So I tried to sneak into her ear to say mantras, So then when they pulled the plug, then they all left, and then I had her for a few hours, And then the nurse was very sweet. She was Burmese. She promised, I said, please take her body very gently. They had to do an autopsy. Take her very gently and put her in the fridge, So anyway, this is one of the things that you could do if your loved one dies in hospital, because you want them to be there for 3 days without being touched. So you ask them to put them in the fridge, and you've got these 3 days you can do practices and prayers. So anyway, in the hospital, this book, back to the book, this woman, she was one of the ones who was giving her organs, and he described this in the book. As far as they're concerned, she's dead. And there she is on the operating table, and the nurse who's monitoring the heartbeat observes as they get the circular saw to cut her from head to toe. She saw that the heartbeat went from 100 to 200 beats. And the author said, I wonder what a dead person has to be worried about, Well, you can deduce from that very logically that she was having what they call an out-of-body experience. Even though she was technically dead, her consciousness was still there. Now, not everybody has that. I've had a few operations, and I never saw a thing. It was heavenly, in fact. I never slept so better in my life. I wonder if you get those on over the counter, can you? That's what Michael Jackson had, wasn't it? And that's what that poor other bloke, that Friends bloke, that's what he had, wasn't it? What's his name? That Friends fellow. Friends, the movie, the television show. Huh? The one who died. That's the one, that one. So anyway, I know I was on an operation. I was, That's the one, yeah. So, but that, anyway, I never had that experience. And many people who die won't have it when they take their organs. But that can be the danger. And it's very simple. The danger is if suddenly her heart went to 200 beats, it's obvious she's having a panic attack. She's freaking out. She's seeing vividly that they're cutting her open, and she's panicking and thinking, don't they realize I'm not dead yet? Are you seeing what I'm saying? And what that will do is, because the mind's so sensitive, before she passed away, the karmic seed that would determine her future life would have been triggered. Let's just hope it might have been a virtuous one. Let's say it was. Then now she's freaking out, That'll disturb everything, and it will trigger a negative seed, and that'll make her mind leave the body with much fear and take a very suffering rebirth. That's the danger. That's the one and only danger, as Rinpoche says. Do you understand the point? Do you understand the point? Did you get that? Is it clear? Already an hour and 10 minutes. I'm sorry, I've only just begun. You better ask me some questions before we finish. Ask me some questions. Any questions you like now? Practical questions. Please ask me. Anybody got questions? Victoria, yes, talk to me, sweetheart.
Thank you, Venerable. So I have two questions. The first one is about keeping someone artificially alive by sort of inducing their breathing. And when we hear stories of people who've been on these
When
sort
what?
of
When what, darling? What did you say? When what?
when we hear stories of people who have been sort of on this life support for 6 months, a year, 2 years, is there
Yes.
benefit to keeping someone on life support when it's known that they
Now
won't?
that's a big, I think it's a really good point because it's such a dilemma that we've created for ourselves in our culture, isn't it? You see, I think it's because perhaps we can see in our medical profession being materialist based, not having the view of being like the Muslim view or the Christian view or the Buddhist view, it's the materialist view. There's somehow a very deep feeling in everybody that somehow death's wrong. It's a mistake if you die, you know, you feel like you've failed. So the thing is, we feel, well, if we can keep them alive, somehow we, you know, then of course the dilemma is you've got to kill them now. You've got to pull the plug because they're never going to get better. But I remember the Dalai Lama saying, just because especially in the world where it's so expensive, it costs you $1 million a day to keep them alive, there's no benefit. So, but in a way, you can see this obsession to keep people living has caused us to have this dilemma, isn't it? So you've got to really just, and that's why it's so important you make your decision before you die. Do you want to be kept alive, or you don't want to just die naturally? And when you've got the Buddhist approach, it will be foolish to keep yourself alive for no reason. It'll be stupid. But if you have got that, in some sense, Lama Zopa would say that as every second that you are in a human body and you're having this suffering, you are purifying. But you've got this dilemma. At some point, you've got to pull the plug if they're not going to get better. If there's some feeling they're going to get better, then it's worth it. So you've got to make this decision. You've got to be very wise, isn't it? Be sensible. Do you understand, Victoria?
Yes, and it sounds like there's value if the
Sorry, what?
perspective it sounds like there's value if the perspective is to keep them alive long enough so that they can hear mantra or for prayer recitation, then there's
Oh, you mean,
immense
yeah. Oh, no,
benefit to that.
so, for example, yeah, like with my sister, for example,
Yes.
for sure, that could, if you have that in mind, that could be very practical. Yes, that could be true. That's true, definitely. That's right, exactly. Because, yeah, that would be true. In that case, you could say that for sure. That's right. And then you after doing that, having, I know in my case, because I mean, I have confidence in these methods, I've got His Holiness to pray for her, I've got Lama Zopa to pray for her, with different people. So that's a good opportunity. That from that perspective, and then you choose the right time, you're saying prayers, then you pull the plug. Yes, that would make sense. But I remember one person, this is interesting too, I remember one Italian mother getting them to keep her son alive, and he was in a coma for 25 years. And he came out of his coma and he said he was conscious the whole time. I think he died soon after. That's pretty incredible, isn't it? Can you imagine that? My God, no benefit. So you've got to be sensible about it. And if you have got these methods, use those methods to help. And if, of course, if there is an opportunity, is a possibility that they could be gotten better again, then sure, do that for sure. Do you understand, Victoria?
I do.
You had another question, darling. What was your other question?
Yeah, the other question is about the fragility that's mentioned, the
The
fragility of
what?
the mind, the fragileness, the
Oh, very
fragility of the
sensitive. Yeah, yeah,
mind.
yeah, right. Yeah.
Yes, I'm wondering if someone experiences a coma, is it likely that that fragility is to remain?
What do you mean by that question?
So it's more of a personal question. I was in a coma when I was 20, and I've noticed since
You
then
were
my
what, darling? You what?
I was in a coma when I was 20,
Yeah,
and
what? And
I've
you're
noticed
conscious?
since then, I don't recall being conscious, but I've noticed that my hearing in particular is so fragile. So I can hear everything and I'm very sensitive. So I'm wondering if there's some
Oh, that's
correlation
interesting. No,
or
I hear what you're saying.
connection.
I see what you mean. That's very interesting, isn't it? Wow, that's interesting. What do you think of that, Dr. Elrond? What, any views on that one? No. Interesting, isn't it? No, I hear your point. I see your point. Yeah. No, I didn't mean that so much as what I meant was your mental consciousness, very, very fearful, very sensitive to the smallest disturbance. I meant like that. But that is an interesting point. It could be, who knows? I don't know, darling, but it's very interesting. Yeah. What else people? So, okay, I have to butt in and answer myself now. So what are the key things you can do once a person's dead, let's say? I mean, Meridian, your beloved brother was killed, wasn't he? 2 days ago, 3 days ago? Shot in the chest, dead as, right there, right. So he did not expect it, did he? And you didn't expect it either. Nobody expected it, right? Isn't it? You kept saying that to him, did you? For yourself, you mean? No, not even necessarily. Okay. Yeah, that's possible, isn't it? Very possible. I know exactly. So, okay, let's just use him as an example, let's say, if you're a Buddhist. What's his name again? Aaron. How would we help Aaron? Where's his body now? In a fridge. In a fridge, yeah. So that's the thing. Okay, the Buddhist view would be, clearly his mind, he's obviously, the mind must have left. Because I think that's one of the things. If you die suddenly and violently, that's very practically 1,000,000,000% certain that the mind would leave immediately because the shock is so severe, Really true, that would be. So some people die slowly and they will stay in their body for 3 days. Some people might leave, like when they die suddenly, and especially shockingly. It's very possible. I know a friend of mine in hospital, a young woman, just had some accident and then she suddenly closed down, all her organs start collapsing, and they wanted to keep her alive in the hospital. The parents gave permission to stop it, but they wanted to keep her alive before the Lama in San Francisco came to do prayers on her body. And then she was still breathing, and then her lungs exploded. Her lungs exploded, her eyes kind of exploded open, and then at that point, and I asked the Geshe through text, has her mind left the body? He said yes. So that shock would cause the mind to go quickly. That's why that woman, 200 beats a minute, it would be a shock to her. The mind would then quickly leave. But on the other hand, by the way, Lama Zopa says, in the book it's there, he says that it doesn't always follow that even if your organs have been cut out, that your mind will leave. So even after the organs have been cut out, you get the body again, the mind could still be there if it's within that 3 days of not breathing, which is an interesting point. So you still do your practices and things for her. So the way to help Aaron, the Buddhist approach would be, from the second that you heard he was dead, you would have, first of all, you would have done what we would have done, would be you'd contact the monastery you're connected to, get all the monks to do prayers for him. Medicine Buddha, for example, one of the practices is a very common one we do. You do those practices yourself. And if you were there with your brother, or even now when you get there, you see his body, right? Yeah. So what if it were my brother, and like with my sister, what I would do, I said mantras in her ear, because his mind could still be there, although it'd be a surprise if it were. But you'd certainly have prayers for him, because the Buddhist view is, it depends on who the person is, whether he died. And it would be hard to have a virtuous point. He was probably having a fight, right? That means his mind wasn't very peaceful. You could probably argue that, isn't it? Which is not the way. No, I heard that. That must be unbearable for him. Even for him, as much. That is unbearable to think of that one. His despair, isn't it? His despair. What's his name? Rob. So we'll do a little medicine Buddha before we finish for Aaron and Rob. Because poor Aaron. This is the interesting point. Buddhist view is to have such compassion for Rob, because he's suffering, because of doing this violence and killing somebody, and then himself. How sad for Rob, unbearable. So you'd say mantras in the air, but mainly you get prayers done for him. Have you done that, Aaron? Have you done that? It was Kopan. You didn't do that. Oh my Lord, you should do that immediately if you want to do that. Contact Kopan and ask. You got the email. You know what to do. You have not contacted. I thought you were doing pujas for your practice. Didn't we talk about that? So sorry, I haven't educated you properly. My mistake. So we'll discuss it later. Okay. Now immediately you should have prayers done if you want to. At Kopan Monastery, have the monks pray, doing medicine Buddha. Can't do better than that. But your own self doing medicine Buddha, and have the monks do it as well. That would be the best thing you can do. Can't do much else. Do you understand? And then the other thing would be really excellent. In Rinpoche talks about this practice. He'd probably be cremated, will he? Yeah, you get his ashes, even just some of his ashes, and you'd have them blessed. And then even those, once they're blessed, you can have those, those little satsa images, those little tiny Buddha images, like bas relief little images. You can have those, you can have them made and mix the ashes with it. So it makes it very precious. Maybe your mother or your family might like that little Buddha image with his ashes in it. Do you understand? Instead of having a canister on the mantelpiece, which is sort of rather sinister, little things like that can be very beneficial for his mind, Lama Zopa would say. It's all in this book of Rinpoche's. I'll just send you the link to it, or I'll let you know. And actually, no, I'm one. Yeah, okay. So that's certainly you can do those things. That's the best you can do. That's the best. And then, of course, the other one is it's a wake-up call. That could be me. You can be, nice people die. Nice people get killed. That's the other one. Remember, life is precious. Don't wait. Wake up call. It's precious. You see that, isn't it? When you read about all those people in the tower, on the 100th floor, not able to escape, knowing they're going to die. No choice. And they're speaking to their wife, no choice. Suddenly. Death is now real. So ask me some questions, please ask me some questions. Yeah. Yes, Tom. Yeah, sure. I understand. Okay, the very first level of Buddhist teachings. I understand, yeah, broadly. So the very first level of Buddhist teachings is recommendations. He's not a creator. From his own observation, given that everything we think and do and say programs us. Do you understand? And given that we don't want suffering and do want happiness, these are the basic things. And it's really true. We don't want suffering, we do want happiness. And Buddha has found from his own experience that what causes us suffering is programming our mind with negativity. Do you understand? Programming your mind with anger, with resentment, with jealousy, with fear, with low self-esteem, with attachment, with all those dramas. And then, of course, so that programs you with misery, and that can only ripen as future suffering, more of that. But the really heavy duty one is when you follow it through with your body and your speech and you harm others as a result. And that's heavier because not just you suffering, others as well. So the heaviest, it seems to be in the world, we can see this, the heaviest one is killing. You can be punched in the nose 47 times, but then you say someone killed somebody, immediately it's more heavy. Do you understand me? So it's killing is one of the heaviest negative. I remember one Lama was asked, if you want to give one piece of advice from Buddhism, he said, don't kill. That means ants and cockroaches as well, don't kill. Because it's the heaviest negative energy. Clearly, and even, especially when it's driven by anger, but also not even anger, look at attachment, When you go fishing, for example, people don't go fishing out of anger. Fishermen are attached to fishing. So harming others. The very first level of ethics in Buddhism, and I think everybody who's got good ethics would all agree, if you're a good communist, good Australian Aboriginal, good Buddhist, you'd agree that not harming others is a pretty basic way to have good ethics. Do you understand me? So that's the very first level of practice. But the key extra point for the Buddha is not just for the sake of the others, it's because it's you, because you're programming yourself. And why the hell would you want to program yourself with negativity? Do you understand me? So killing would be the heaviest one. So the Buddhist view is that the main cause, the karmic cause of getting a human body next life, or this life, is one of our non-killing karmic seeds was triggered at the time of death when this process started. That's how come. So we can argue, we could say from the Buddhist perspective, not more than a few weeks before our mind found its way to our mother's fallopian tube, where it joined daddy's egg. A few weeks before that, we went in another body. Could have been a kangaroo's body. And the death process started. And then due to some virtuous karmic seed, because there's millions of karmic seeds in that kangaroo's mind from virtuous lives, one of those seeds was triggered, an external condition. Maybe the kangaroo heard someone singing a mantra on the way past, and that triggered one of their virtuous karmic seeds. Who knows, Or could have been your pet. You could have been someone's pet and they were Buddhist and they were singing prayers to you, or something happened and that triggered a virtuous karmic seed of yours from one of your past practices of non-killing, and that was triggered. And already, even before you stop breathing, this has already determined your future life. your mother and father already lined up. They mightn't even have met each other yet. So they didn't make you, baby. You found your way to them because you've got some history with them. At the same time as that karmic seed that is the cause of your human body being triggered, then the other karmic seeds, secondly, that are going to produce all your personality. And that's a shocking concept for us in the West because we assume we get our personality from our parents. No, you do not. You bring your own personality with you from your own tendencies. Do you understand me? This is a massive point in Buddhism. Your mind is yours. Are you listening to me?
Of course.
You look
I'm
like
just wondering about the whole argument of environment.
what, dear?
Environment, discussion about environment.
Yeah, I'm trying to tell you, so I haven't finished yet.
Oh, okay.
Okay. I'll just, you looked over there thinking you're wandering off. I wasn't sure.
I'm just
Thinking, okay.
Yes.
First one is the seed that will determine your body, a human body in your case. Second, all the karmic tendencies of your habits that will then produce your personality. They might be similar to your mother and father. That's why you're born to them, but they don't give you those. That's the crucial point. They're yours. Your good ones and your bad ones. Third, all the karmic seeds that produce your experiences in this life, the people you meet, how they treat you, when good things happen, bad things happen. Do you understand me? But the fourth one is even the way the physical environment impacts upon you. So there's explanations in the Vajrayana system about how that can be. It seems quite abstract. So the 4 ways our karma ripens, if you look at your life now, you can divide it into four things. 1, your type of body, a human one, as opposed to a dog. 2, your mental tendencies. 3, your experiences really at the hands of others, how you're seen and treated in the world. Do you understand me? And even 4th is the physical world, how it impacts upon you. So if you think of killing, no, think of non-killing. If non-killing ripens in those 4 ways, then 1, you'll get a human body. 2, you'll wake up in this life with no thought to kill. Now, you look at the human world, that's unusual. Most humans have a tendency to kill, which is a tragedy, But if you have no thought to kill, that's the fruit of non-killing. 3, the fruit of non-killing would be you don't get killed and you won't die young. And 4, environmentally, you'll have a fat, healthy body, and whatever you eat and what you drink and the air and the water and the physical world doesn't harm you. We can see some people like that. I always joke about Warren Buffett. He's like 96. He's finally retired. He said he now feels he's getting old. He said, I started feeling getting old when I was 90. It's very interesting. Now I'm forgetting names. So he's handed the job over of running his massive company to somebody else. But he's 96 and he's famous for his very ordinary diet. Since he's a little boy, his main diet, cheeseburgers, vanilla ice cream, and Coca-Cola. And he's 96. So it just proves, I'm sorry, that good food is not the main cause of having a healthy body or of living long. That means he's got lots of non-killing karma in his experience, similar to the cause, gas tank. Do you understand me? And then the fourth, the fourth, that one, and the fourth one, he's very healthy. So he must have non-killing karma as well. Do you understand me? So we've got these 4 ways our karma ripens. So you can have the human birth as a result of non-killing, but you can wake up with a tendency to kill. You can have no tendency to kill, but you might die young. Look at your brother, You could have no killing when it comes to the tendency or the experience, but you might get sick all the time. So, but the ideal is to live in vows, especially live in vows that makes it much more powerful. The karmic impacts are much deeper when you commit your life to living a non-harming life. You commit to that. That makes the karmic seeds much stronger. And that's the cause of getting a decent human body, decent human mind, good conditions, and a good environment so you can keep on practicing your spiritual path. That's the plan. Bare minimum plan. Do you understand? And it's in our hands. It's up to us. Do you understand?
You're speaking about. I'm just wondering.
What, darling?
Like killing with
anything. No, that's not killing. That's not killing. No, killing. Okay, I understand. Everything we do does leave a karmic seed. But for an action to be what they call a complete action, an action of killing to be a complete action, which would be one that will bring a human body, and then the other 3 tendencies, there need to be 4 things in place when you do it. 1, there needs to be a being there, like a mouse. 2, the intention, I will kill the mouse. And then 2B, the motivation, anger, annoyed, disgusting. How dare a mouse be in my kitchen? In other words, your mind involved in it. 3, you do the action. 4, the result, a dead mouse. That's a complete action. Are you listening to me? You keep wandering off everywhere. I don't know where you go. Stay.
I'm not wandering off. I'm just digesting what you're saying.
Okay, did you hear me? Did you hear me?
Absolutely.
Good, darling. That will be a complete action of killing. Now, you could have a mouse there, and you could have no intention to kill because you don't see the mouse, but your foot goes on it and the mouse is dead. You don't create the karma of killing because there was no thought. It's not in your mind, didn't even know there was a mouse there. Do you understand me? So there needs to be a complete action, but still there's karma. I mean, meat is definitely from being a body, and so is, leather shoes, a leather belt that was an animal's body at some point. But at the same time, that's not the same as killing. But if you rejoice in the butcher who killed your cow for you, then that's like killing. That's heavy. You're rejoicing in it. That's like you killed. That's even worse. You could be a vegan, but millions of creatures die for that wheat, don't they? So I mean, you can't escape it really. That's why at least if we can try to not harm others and do any action we do motivated by the wish to do least harm as possible. You understand? That's right. What else, people? We haven't covered most of everything, but we've covered something. Yes, we've. Good, go on. What are they? You know what? Yeah, yes, it seems like it is. I did a series of classes in their office in New York, and they do, I think it's about 8 or 10 classes, and they're individual, and you listen to one each week, and there are questions and meditations and all those things. Yeah, that's what they do. What, dear? Well, I mean, yeah, okay. Okay, let's look at that. See, also I find it, this I have to say, we're going to go over time, I'm sorry, you have to leave. But I know that I think we all always only mention this particular karma in relation to eating meat. But I've never yet had a person say, what's the karma of wearing leather shoes? It's the same point. But I think we always mention eating meat because we're very attached to eating. There's a lot of emotion around meat eating and vegetarianism and veganism, isn't there? A lot of emotion because we're very attached to food. I think this is a reason. So I remember this, I always tell this story. One time in Leeds, years ago in the UK, I had a photo of me in a shop, in this cheese shop. And I had a photo put on Facebook. And it was me buying this kick-ass cheddar. And then these people complained, how dare a Buddhist nun eat cheese? Who do you think you are? Outrageous. And I didn't want to be political. But I kept thinking, I always wondered, I'd always wondered how many bugs get killed on the road when you drive a car, right? But sure enough, you Google it, and some Dutch dude had done research, and just on the number plate, per kilometer, per car, whatever, it's like trillions of little baby bugs get slaughtered. I put that story on, and he said, oh, you can't help that. That's just collateral damage. I was so shocked. But if you ate those bugs, then you'd be a monster. Isn't that weird? So irrational. And then the other story I found is even more outrageous. This Australian journalist, he got fed up with all the vegan, vegetarian fundamentalists giving lectures, So he quoted this wheat field where they, where you grow wheat. And who eats the meat? Well, maybe 20% is for the bulls, for the meat eaters, but 80% is for the wholly vegans and vegetarians, right? I'm not being rude. But this wheat field, he said, one season, the off season, millions of tiny little field mice gathered there. He said they were so cute. He had a photo. They sang love songs to each other. Well, guess what they do to the field mice when you've got to plant your wheat? They slaughter them, and they don't do it gently. And even then, he said, oh, you can't help that. That for me is beyond hysterical irrational. So in other words, as long as you eat it, you're a monster. But you slaughter the creatures, it doesn't matter. It's too demented to words. So it shows how we're just very extremely irrational, which doesn't mean, oh, good, I've now got off the hook, I can eat meat. That's not the point. That's not the point. Everything we think and do and say programs our mind. So it seems to me it's more depending on the person, you know, because it's the mind involved. So if you eat meat occasionally or something, but you've got compassion, you're aware, you say prayers, you blow on the meat. Lama Zopa says even a bone that's 1,000 years old, because of the connection between that consciousness, God knows where it is now, and that bone, which was its body 1,000 years ago, is so strong. And the power of mantra, just saying mantra and blowing on the bone, the consciousness benefits. So there's ways of mitigating what we do, you know. But even if you don't eat meat, don't be so arrogant and think you're so holy. It just proves it by the stories I told. That's really arrogance, you know. You're causing, by you eating your bloody vegetables, you're causing the death of billions of creatures. At least have compassion, whether you eat their flesh or eat the rice from that wheat field, the wheat from that wheat field. Have compassion. Be aware that creatures die. Just by our existence, we're harming each other. So have awareness and compassion and do whatever you can to be careful not to harm. That's the best way to put it, you know. And protect yourself by living in vows of not killing. It protects your mind so much more powerfully. Do you understand, people? Time to finish then. So many more things to say. But the main thing is, yeah, okay, Lama Zopa's book, How to Face Death Without Fear, it's still digital, you can get it, and paperback must be coming out soon. Yeah, but it's what I was going to do also is I was supposed to do course notes for this week, 2 weeks I'm here. So I'll put together a PDF of teachings that we're covering in the 2 weeks, including this one. I'll get excerpts from Lama Zopa's book and I'll put those in. So at least you can get some advice in there, okay? Yes, sweetheart. Have what, darling?
Have the sense that they can communicate
with other beings. Yeah. So okay, that's an interesting point. All I can do is give you the Buddhist explanation of the kinds of beings that exist in the world. I can only do that. So we've got humans. Then we have animals, which you can see, all the tiny ones as well. Then you have these disembodied beings who are called spirits or ghosts. So you hear about those, right? You hear about some house that's haunted and people see this 17th century lady. And you can tell it was the person who did live there. They got reborn as a spirit in that place because they're very attached to that place. So being born as a spirit is not a happy birth. It's a very strong attachment. Also, many spirits harm others. Many spirits can cause illness. They're very powerful, some of them. But also, the only way to explain this business of people communicating with their mother or Mozart or something, that the only way that Buddhists would put it would be that they're probably spirits, but they're not. If it is your mother, it wouldn't be. You wouldn't see your mother. It wouldn't be your mother. I mean, everybody. Not more than 3 days after your mind leaves the body, you've already taken a new rebirth. So no one's just floating around in no man's land. Everybody's got a rebirth. It's possible to be a spirit, but spirits are so suffering, they don't have enough rationale to be able to have a chat to you. But some spirits can be powerful and they can act like they're your mother. It could be possible, but do you understand? It could be, but hard to know. You understand? But some beings, like the Christians call them guardian angels, there's another realm of existence called the God realms, and that's really like what Christians and Muslims call heaven. They are virtuous people. They're not very advanced spiritually, but they could be also very helpful. Like they call them the devas. They could be helpful. That could be them, possibly. Do you understand me?
Yes, I was just wondering if it's about some sort of communication or energetic exchange, however you would describe it, where that information occurs to the 5 senses or the 6 senses.
I don't understand those words. I don't know about that.
No.
What I just said was the best way I could put it. All right. So time to go, 20 to 9. Thank you, people. Thank you so much. Anything that's been useful, even 1% of this conversation, I'm very happy. So put it into practice. But yes, let's do a little medicine Buddha now for Aaron and for Brad. Rob, okay. And anybody else we know, people right now are dying. Think of all, Rob and Aaron have them right there, especially precious Rob, who got so angry he killed somebody and then he got so despairing he killed himself. How such pain, not to mention Aaron's pain. So we think of them there, and then we see medicine Buddha. We visualize medicine Buddha, looking just like the regular Buddha, but he's blue. And then we say the mantra a few times. We imagine pouring blessings of light coming out from the medicine Buddha's heart, going into the hearts of Aaron, into the hearts of Rob, and everybody else who's suffering, blessing them, calming their precious minds, praying and hoping they get a good, decent human rebirth. Taya taon bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze ranza samungate swaha. Taya taon bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze ranza samungate swaha. Taya taon bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze ranza samungate swaha. Taya taon bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze ranza samungate swaha. Taya taon bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze ranza samungate svaha. Taya taon bekanze, bekanze maha bekanze, bekanze ranza samungate svaha. And the biggest gift we can give to everybody else is be ready for our own death, so we don't waste our lives, we create virtue, benefit others, and we die with a happy mind, and we help others as well to help them die, navigate that from this life to the next, so they don't waste time. Jam chob sem chob rinpoche ma ke panam ke yuchi ke panyampa me pa yang gong ne gong du phaba shog ke wa di nyu du dag lama sangye drup gyo ne rowa chikang marupa de sala gopa shog. And we just delight that Lama's open tree has been found now in Nepal. We haven't seen his face yet, so may he come soon and carry on his job of helping sentient beings so we can become like him. That's it, people. Thank you, precious ones. Thank you, everybody. Okay. See you tomorrow, next week, or sometime. Bye, peace. Bye, sweetheart.
Venerable, I love you.
Thank you so much, Venerable.